stuff with the Vellum IO node. So this is a special SOP that they made for caching Vellum simulations. It already has the attribute culling, or removing of unnecessary attributes, on the save filter. If you just do a traditional file cache, you'll see that they have the same save filter, but they just don't have those presets. And then this as well is built into manage constraint geometry and stuff like that as well. So with the draping, we did end up saving the constraints because we wanted to preserve like the state of the simulation, like the stretched. We didn't want to reinitialize a new cloth. So that's why we did it there. But I think with this draping, if this is just going to be for rendering, we don't necessarily need the constraints or extra information. So you can see here, there's just a ton of extra point attributes, and they're stripping them all off and getting rid of them. And that's mainly just to preserve file size, and you speed up disk like read and write, and just previewing and working with the data, the less data that you have. So all this stuff they're kind of saying is unnecessary. So I'll just do a save. Oh no. Oh no. I think. Let me try it again. Was it the Oh yeah, so I ran into this issue last time. It is just the storage type. So we should be good. We'll let this cook for a little bit. I have been going in, making some small improvements and stuff like that to the Vex page on my resources, or not resources, but just Vex kind of cheat sheet, or just a glossary of all the attributes on my website. I've been trying to go through and make improvements to the Vellum section as I've been preparing for these streams and stuff. So just organizing this, and a lot of those attributes that was in the save filter is these internal worker variables. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, it's helpful for myself as well, but I figure I might as well provide it for everybody if I'm going to be going through and documenting, or just making these notes or whatever. I guess I have an extra line of text there I need to delete or whatever. Yeah, it's super handy. Yeah, I'm slowly working to improve it and build it out more, and just make it like a bit more easy to use, I guess. So kind of categorizing it a bit better. And thank you for the tier 1, a lift not much. I appreciate it. The 3 months, we're getting some long time viewers in here. So yeah, like just making it as concise as possible. So I added this data types guide at the top just to refer to the letter names. But yeah, with the Vellum stuff, so those extra attributes, some of them are internal worker variables. Basically what that means is like they get used by the solver every frame when it's making collision checks and like integration. It has to keep track of the previous point position and then the position before that. So it's like double previous or whatever. So it's 2 frames earlier. And then instead of adding and deleting those attributes every single frame, it's a bit expensive or just slow to manage the geometry like that. So they keep it around for the entire simulation. So then just after, when you save it to disk, just delete those because you don't need them anymore. But that's just why they're there, why they keep track of them or whatever. So generally, these internal worker variables is like, you might be able to use them for like visualizations or like augmenting the render stuff, but generally you just can ignore them. This is kind of a slow slow cook. I'm just gonna turn it off for right now. So we have 11 frames. Should have 11 frames. Oof, I forgot to put the $F there. I still had this from the drape mode. But yeah, I think I can just change it around like that. You were using the attributes player too for pop R&D? The Vex guide? Or you were using Vellum for pop R&D? Thank you for the 2 months. Tier 1. I appreciate it. Whoops. Yeah, so this is super useful for R&D, or just a quick, at a glance, like guide of what attributes you have available to modify, just like possibilities and stuff like that. So yeah, so we did 13 frames of a cache. And I'm just gonna take a look at this. So yeah, this is taking like 29 megabytes. One thing you can do if you really want to really optimize the storage, if you just do the add sop and then you do delete geometry but keep points, you'll have a little bit less data, because you don't really need to even care about the connectivity of things. And then here, if you look, like, you don't even need possibly this much information, like velocity. The P scale, you probably don't care about that. So if we just take a look here, each frame is like 2.5, we'll just call it 2.6 megabytes. So I'm just gonna go back here to delete attributes and just turn it into an asterisk for everything. So the only thing I'm gonna be keeping now is position. And I'm just gonna save it again. So we were at 2.6 megabytes before per frame, and we'll see what happens with it now. Ruby Yachts, thank you for the 2 months. Appreciate it. So yeah, the idea here is, like, if you're just trying to strip it back and keep as minimal or like little information as you need, all you really need is the point positions as like a bare minimum. So we'll let this keep cooking for a little bit longer. I don't really need to do the whole animation or whatever. We'll just try to keep moving somewhat quickly today. Player 2, recreating the Man vs. Machine 2017 Air Max commercial to learn more about Vellum Pop with the Air Jordan ones. Yeah, I think that a lot of those Nike commercials, other companies have them too, but just trying to recreate the little 1 or 2 second shots in them is a really good learning experience. Would it be fair to say if you have 1,000 points with no attributes, it would be the same size as 500 points with 3 float attributes? It depends, I think, quite a bit. Like, because when you save this stuff out as the bgo.sc, so bgo is already a binary version of the geometry, instead of, if you could eliminate the B and just save it as a geo, and it would be like an ASCII storage format, just like a CSV, like comma separated value, or like if you save your Maya scene, or you could even save Houdini as the text file. So moving it to binary storage, and then the SC adds an additional layer of compression. So sometimes if you have like 1,000 points and they all have the same p-scale value, the compression can recognize that and give you a little bit of like storage space. So it depends kind of what the attributes are storing, not only that they exist, like if the value fluctuates for each point, it will take up more space. But yeah, just getting rid of them in general is like a good habit to get into, I would say. How the hell do you know all that stuff? Just from like working with big caches before, trying to work efficiently on older hardware systems and older, before you had as much memory in your computer and stuff like that. Yeah, and then just like learning and reading and stuff like that. But yeah, so just generally like keeping an eye on that stuff. You can always do these tests yourself and see the size. But generally, I would think that like 1,000 points, you're kind of just thinking, like if you just think of it as an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, you have a table that has 1,000 entries with 3 columns for X, Y, and Z position. And then if you have 500 points with 3 float attributes, I guess it would be it should be like pretty equivalent in file size, I would say. But again, like I was saying earlier, it kind of depends on what those 3 extra float attributes are doing. If they're just all zeros, the SC, or if you're compressing your file size, it should like kind of compress those areas easier. It's like if you have a JPEG image that's a black image, the JPEG compression will make that a super small file size because it knows all the pixels are 0. But if your JPEG image is like rainbow colors and like every little pixel is different, the JPEG file size will be a lot bigger. Maybe that makes more sense. So yeah, I think 24 frames should be okay. I'll just stop it after it finishes that. Dubtronics, how's it going? Possible wasted, how's it going? Looks like it didn't like me stopping my cache. We'll just restore that. Should be easy to do. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes the Houdini, some of these new ones are a little buggy, it seems. I'm on the 0.499 or something, but just the caching stuff seems like it's gotten a little bit less stable recently. All right. So I'll just put it back into that stream folder. And we should be up and running with the same cache. And if you remember, before I went on to that, we were at 2.6 megabytes before I made those adjustments, and now we're all the way down to 1.4 megabytes. So almost half the file size. If you're doing really high resolution cloth simulations and stuff like that, like you can get out of hand pretty quickly with the file size, especially doing longer shots and stuff. So it's just as much storage or whatever as you can. So now you might be thinking, like, what do we do with all these points? If I want to render them, they're not connected or whatever. What you can do is I usually just do time shift. See that we were animating the source here to just say this part is pinned to the animation, unveil the Lambo. So what I'll do here is just delete to remove the time dependency. So this doesn't have to cook or update every frame. And then you can just do attribute copy. Whoops. And then if you just set this to P for position, you're pretty much back in action, playing the simulation. So all we're doing is just taking the point position that we've cached, because that's really the only thing that's changing or that we care about from the simulation, and updating that to our static geometry. And then there was some of these artifacts I touched on kind of at the start of the first stream, just between the grids or triangles or whatever topology you have, a bit of crinkling. So yeah, if you just add a subdivide after that, depending if you can afford to or not, that can sometimes help sort out some of those issues. You have a class from 2 to 5? Oh no, 2 classes at once. You have to figure out a way to multitask. But hopefully the VODs or that stuff is still helpful for you, Romulus. Triangle better for cloth. So at the start of that stream last Saturday, I talked about it a little bit with this example right here, bending over a pipe. So this, let's just go back to a lower resolution. Like I was saying, generally, I have some, let me just hide that pin. Generally, I'll use quads. Like sometimes triangles are better, but it depends on your situation and stuff like that. So if I go into triangles here, depending on what you're colliding against, you can get some weird angles and stuff like that. There's different ways to describe triangles, whether you're doing alternating. Sometimes that's better than just doing triangles. Some people talked about doing the poly, I believe, patch node. Or you can as well just do a remesh. But it depends on what you're doing for a drape or something like that. I've usually just found that quads is generally okay. So you do get a bit of this like artifacting, but subdividing afterwards or doing things like that will generally help fix it. So just as a default, I'm usually starting with quads, but yeah, I guess it depends which solver you're using and stuff like that. I know with the old cloth solver, Side Effects was recommending that you start with quads. But yeah, it just depends. You might try both and see which one works better. So yeah, we look at this area. Where was it? Just somewhere in here. Starting to get some weird stuff happening. So one iteration of subdivision can help. Dr. Robotvinik, good to see you again. You could try sometimes doing multiple layers of subdivision. I would think like this is probably too much geometry to try to render or work with. Another thing you can do is the blur. This just gives you like even more smoothing, so it can kind of strip out some detail. But if you really want to get rid of some of those like ugly artifacts, or you're really like having issues with them in the render, that can be an option. You might not see it in motion. I'm just going through some possible workflows or stuff like that. But yeah, I would think generally I'll try not to blur because it will just remove the detail and stuff like that that we want to kind of keep. So yeah, I would generally just work kind of like this. If we want to get rid of the attributes, like I was saying, like we started working with this source geometry and then just updating the P, the position attribute. But we don't need a lot of this other stuff. So I'll just do the same thing here and do the asterisks. So we're getting rid of all those extra attributes that have to do with cloth collisions, and it's just for the solver, the physical properties and stuff like that. I'm gonna move my camera around and just do a little bit of shader development and shader tweaking and stuff like that. Just turn this object on. Maybe turn the vehicle on. Maybe we'll do. I'll just start without the vehicle. So yeah, and then I'll just do a quick kind of environment. So if I'm doing a little studio, I usually just start with the grid and then bend it 90 degrees, kind of fold it or whatever, and then subdivide to get rid of that crease. So something like this is probably okay just to get started with or whatever. Might move the camera around again to frame things up a little bit better. All right, that should be good. So do material network, redshifts, material. We'll do one for the backdrop and another one for the cloth. I'm just gonna call this paper, kind of like the photography paper or whatever people put up for cyclorama. Zafir, how's it going? And cloth. So the paper one, generally just make the roughness or reflection somewhat broad, and the IOR for Fresnel like very close to 1. It's kind of like a paper. And just make sure that our materials got applied. Looks like that's true. And we'll pop open the redshift. That doesn't look too good right now. What I'm gonna do is just reconfigure this so I can kind of see both at the same time. So we don't have any lights in our scene, so just added the headlight that gives us a pretty flat or boring looking render. Gonna move my view over and then add a redshift light. Need to add the redshift shelf and put the grid light. So now we have a bit more interest, dynamic lighting or whatever. Maybe make the light a bit bigger. Then I might add one just like directly overhead. Just as kind of like an ambient light or something like that. Then redshift, turn on the GI just to get a bit more realistic lighting or whatever, the global illumination. Coming back from Tenet, must watch. What is oh, the Tenet, the Christopher Nolan movie? Maya or Blender? Tell Nick. This is Houdini. So we had the overhead light. We'll just go back in here. Maybe the paper shader. I'm just gonna set my diffuse to 1, like the full intensity. And then we can start messing around with the cloth. Houdini. I don't know. Were you memeing, Patelnik? So there's no cloth presets with Redshift. I know Mantra or Karma, they have a few built in for like Velvet, but generally for Redshift, like maybe aluminum or something of that. you were memeing. But yeah, like starting with a metal can get you close to like a silk or something like that in terms of cloth. You could switch back to IOR and like, I wouldn't go this high for a cloth, but maybe like 3 or something like that. You could add diffuse back in, try to do red, like a satin or something like that. You can get somewhat close, I would say, with these kinds of settings. Just trying out some different things with roughness. This is like a latex or something like that. So maybe a little bit rougher. Maybe go over to the blue. And then if you're going for more of like, this might be like a parachute or something like that. Chuck on substance cloth texture. So yeah, that's one thing I was gonna bring up. Substance, or you go to the CO textures. They have some good fabrics in here. Some of them are based off of substance materials, but yeah, if you're actually looking for like a bit of fibers or stuff like that, like this would be a linen or some kind of sheet. They have some woven fabrics and knitted kind of stuff like that. Maybe this white. This could be like a micro knit or something like that. But yeah, Substance Share, they have a lot of fabric stuff as well. I might just try this 4K version. Just gonna put it in the downloads. I'll just extract. So we have color, displacement, normal, opacity roughness. The displacement, probably just use it as like a bump or something for now. This is a super high resolution mesh. If you actually try to do like physical displacement, it might be somewhat slow. This cloth doesn't have it. It might have, it looks like it actually does have some opacity. A little bit of like breathability or whatever. But yeah, we could start to put this in. We'll just grab maybe start with the color, I guess. Sometimes I'll just drag and drop the files into here just to get the file path. We'll put down the RS texture, color, and then just put that into diffuse color. We don't have any UVs on this, but that's all right because we have a super procedural, somewhat procedural way of still manipulating our cloth by using this attribute copy to like pull stuff from the source and apply it to the simulation. So all the way up here at the top with the grid, we can just do UV project. Just do initialize. I do a quick shade. You can just verify that looks okay. I think we can, if we really wanted to, just go straight down with it like that. And go back into the camera. With this attribute, what we want to do is delete everything. I think we can leave it like that, actually. But yeah, the UV is going to be on vertices. We have P and UV. I think we can just add it right there. And we're getting it as a vertex attribute. Yeah, it's, I mean, generally really helpful to be able to work this way as long as your topology isn't changing or you're just being like as non-destructive as possible. So I know with like Maya with NCloth, it was super non-procedural. Like even after setting up an NCloth simulation with Maya, I tried to change the divisions of my cloth. Like this is 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe they've changed it since then, but even doing that, I would have to set up like an entirely new solver. It was just super, super destructive way of working or whatever. So it looks like this texture is like too stretched out. Let me go. Just gonna set this to my cloth view. I might just go type it straight into the color. And then I can just adjust the scale over here. I think it looks like it updated. But yeah, if I just move the scale down to 1, we get more repetitions. So this is repeating like 4 times over the grid, over our surface. But even this is a bit, looks still a bit like these threads. I don't know, depending on the type of cloth or blanket we're saying this is, maybe this makes a little bit more sense for the threads to be like this small, just compared to like the headlight or other features of the car. They were still using Maya for cloth when you were at Blue Sky. Not sure if they're switching. Yeah, a lot of big animation studios and stuff like that. I don't know if it's just licensing or like workflow issues or stuff like that, but there can be bigger factors at play for their pipelines, that whether it's just the dependency of their workflow requires that. It can be frustrating sometimes, though, for sure. So yeah, but I was just changing the scale around a little bit. So I'm setting it as a UV attribute here. You can change it in the shader, but if I can, I prefer to like change it directly using the UV attribute, because then as I make more texture samplers, I can just leave them at 1. I don't have to keep like updating settings or stuff like that. I might get the displacement one next. And I'm gonna do a bump. And then if it's a black and white image, just leave it at height field. And because this is data, you just want to make sure the gamma is at 1 and you're not doing the sRGB correction. Let's just do that. I think it's way too strong right now. You can see the pattern, like it's definitely doing something, but the black artifacts is like too much self-shadowing, or it's just like too much. Let me just do the region. The noise mode? Is there a noise mode? Or you're just saying adding this as we've enabled the noise mode ourselves? I might go turn on SOP level updates. There is a normal map. Yeah, I'll add it. But right now, what I've done is I've just taken the displacement map and added it to bump. But yeah, what I'll also do under Redshift, I'm just gonna switch these settings so we can resolve maybe even more of the noise. Maybe just take the camera and just update this lensing a little bit. So just punch everything in, just to see a bit more of like what's going on with our shaders and stuff like that. So yeah, and maybe I'll do a quick snapshot just to compare against. So we could get the normal map. I think with normal maps we actually have to do, like Redshift, you have to apply the map within this node instead of feeding the texture into it. It's just the way that they've set it up. And then I think you can put that right into the bump. You get like a somewhat similar result. With normal maps, I usually don't scale the normal. We could look at the two different results. It looks like you get a little bit better like self-shadowing or faking of that with the height map. Sometimes you should use the bump and set it to tangent space. Oh, okay, I think I see what you're saying. So we can take the normal, pump it in here, and instead of height, tangent space normal. So I'll just restart the render and see what happens. You think 1 is too strong? That's the official way. Do you think 1 is too strong, or should we just -1 to invert it? Looks like -1 is giving me... This definitely seems like the best result so far. I think this is looking good. So it might just be like coordinate space thing with like y up, or maybe like flip normal y instead of going to -1. Yeah, I guess it's kind of the same thing as either type in -1 or just do flip normal y. So yeah, that's one thing you can do, and then if you want to, you can like even layer them. Sometimes I've done that before the bump map blender. And if you leave this to like additive mode, these normal maps look okay, but sometimes I've seen some where like the normal is kind of high frequency and the like displacement or the height map is like broad scale displacements. So sometimes layering them or stacking them this way with like additive mode, and then you can weight them differently or whatever. But I think this for right now seems okay. Yeah, and I guess if you want to, like the color that we're color map we're using, like it's not too, there is a bit of noise, whatever. You could like even replicate that with a procedural noise if you wanted to. But if you were in a pinch, like, or you could always just multiply it with a color or color correct it. So generally with cloths, like you don't really need to look for the specific dye of the material you're trying to replicate. You can always could do it here if we just do like multiply. Where is it? So now we're multiplying the two different colors. So keeping the dark information like the shadows and stuff like that from the white color, and then just adding or tinting whatever color we want to apply on top of things. Like Nike sportswear car combination or something like that. Yeah, so we keep moving, apply some of the other ones. There is opacity. I don't know how much we need to worry about it, but it will make the rendering a bit more expensive. But Redshift has the opacity stored right here in overall. You can just overwrite it. So white is opaque and black would be like see-through. It was super subtle on the texture, so I'm not sure how much. Looks like we can see through a little bit, just letting some kind of pinholes or whatever breathe. I'm just gonna get out of this yellow and go back to the white for right now, and just reorganize before this really gets out of hand. All right. So we also have roughness. So what I've done so far is just leave this at the default. We were working off of like silver, but the roughness just has a bit of differentiation in it. It looks like overall they're saying it's a lot more rough than we are. Like white is 100% blurry reflections pretty much. So for a knitted surface like that, there's like replicating a lot of micro surface bump or noise or whatever. So put this into the roughness. You can see that's killed the reflectivity or whatever of it quite a bit. I think they add some black areas to kind of simulate like threads sticking out from it or whatever. But yeah, looks pretty good so far. Vegan Nuts, how's it going? So yeah, I think we should probably turn off the gamma override for these other textures as well. Anything that you're not visualizing, like the color, the beauty output of, you generally want to disable gamma override. I think it already was on. I kind of misspoke. I'm sorry. So by enabling it, you're explicitly saying don't adjust the gamma, treat it as a linear. And then if you turn this off, it will apply automatically the sRGB correction. So with the color map, you want to leave it like this. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear there, but basically you're disabling gamma override to say apply the sRGB correction. This enabled is basically, I'm thinking of it as explicitly saying treat this as a linear texture, like don't adjust the sRGB. Sorry if that was a little confusing to people. But yeah, if you want to with the roughness, you could start to adjust the gamma. So if you want it like a little bit shinier, start to increase the gamma to change it. You can also do color corrections or things like that. So I'm just doing level scale to make everything a lot darker, or basically just saying more reflective, less rough by making the level scale just super small. It's kind of like a mirror, or just a lot more I don't know, maybe this is like a waxed coating of a cloth or something like that. Just go back. I might maybe move the camera. See what happens. Do you plan on blending this shot with the pyro smoke, making it a full ad? Maybe get a free Lambo? The influencer Lambo? I thought about adding this in, perhaps. I'm not really shading it right now or anything like that. I'm just doing this more of a demo or whatever, but yeah, if I was to add it in, I thought about adding some shots, like seeing it in the garage, getting like prepped or revealed or whatever. But yeah, I haven't 100% like spent a lot of time planning out that thing, other than just some brief thoughts or whatever. Like there's no storyboards or actual things. CG Rockstar has a pretty cool looking cut, kind of like previs for his car project. He did a really good job of tracking down all the footage and stuff like that from existing things and like cutting it together in really interesting ways. But yeah, so if I was to do it, I'd probably go back to like, there's like a Gran Turismo. Maybe it's like 2. The cover of it. Maybe it's 3. They have one, I don't know what it was. Maybe it's just like the original. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it. Going down memory lane. Yeah, it's quite old at this point. But yeah, just some of the photography or whatever of it is pretty cool. Yeah, so something like this, I think, like a lot more closer to metallic looking or whatever. I think that kind of it's a little bit more stylized or whatever, but that's pretty cool. You start seeing like a bit of the car beneath it. This might actually, I don't know, it might be a Lambo underneath, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think this is a pretty cool way to show like the little folds and details and stuff like that. So if I was to go back to that right here, I could just do material, preset, whatever you want to start with, iron or lead or anything close to that. And you're kind of back in that kind of luxury territory. So yeah, maybe I don't know, something like that. Move these lights just to give it a little bit more of a shape. Super mysterious. So I'd probably want to extend the studio out or whatever a little bit more, but just gonna leave it like this for right now. Yeah, and then the last thing, if you want to get some motion blur, because we're doing cloth, our topology isn't changing. So if we just go to redshift with the motion blur, you should just be able to enable mesh. You can do the 2 steps. We've saved our cache on integer frames or whatever, so we wouldn't really be gaining anything by doing like multiple steps over the duration of a shutter. Like we can't really recreate that information without doing saving out more sub-steps. Like if you wanted to, you could do the time blend to interpolate your cache information, but you would actually need to save out more information for like subframe motion. We're not doing substantial motion, so it wouldn't really help that much. I'll just do a bucket render, kind of see how this turns out. Looks like it's moving along at somewhat decent speed. So I'm gonna get some water, let this render. I'll be right back, and after this render finishes, we'll switch over and start doing some wire hair stuff with Vellum. That should be pretty fun. Didn't finish yet. It's a super... Turn the noise down too low. So I went down to like 0.0025 or whatever. But, or I guess just that motion blur area is taking it a lot longer to resolve. So I'll get another Houdini open for the start of our next little demo project. So I'll just leave that going for a little bit. So I'm just going to do a grid, like a strip of fabric or something like that. And add some curves to it, like a little hair system or whatever. So I think just reduce the columns. You kind of have like a quad strip now. And that should be okay, just to get started. I do maybe a twist. Maybe just something like that. And I think if I want to start with the hair system, I'm just gonna do it on the untwisted geometry. You just do hair generate, and this will, it's kind of like the scatter sop, but it will add the hairs as well. You do different things here, I think, for length and number of segments. So that's like each hair will have that many. You'd look inside of this if you want to see what's going on. They have a lot of like attribute management, but it's basically just copying scattering points and then copying lines to them. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. So you'd see the motion blur from it is showing up. I don't know why this might have just found a weird frame or something like that, but when you start to move over to a really reflective shader, you will see like a lot more of those artifacts. So maybe doing that blur, whoops, just gonna kill this for right now. But yeah, doing that attribute blur can get rid of some of those kinks if you really need to. So I'll just close this so my computer doesn't die. All right. So relax is the same as like the scatter node relax, and just gonna move the density down. Just have something a little less numbers of hairs, 260 or something like that. And you can do some things, I think, like they have hair clump. I don't know if you want to do that, but maybe bend. So this one I think you should be able to do it maybe with the paint. I might be doing it the wrong direction. Let me try the other one. Frizz. So you can see this one is adding a little bit of crinkliness or whatever to the things. If you're doing, I don't know, if someone was in the blow dryer or something like that, you could do it that way. We should be somewhat ready to get started if you just do Vellum configure hair. This will set up the necessary constraints and everything like that for doing any kind of wire system. We're starting from a hair standpoint, but if you're thinking of any kind of wires or soft body curves or stuff like that, it's just using what they call, Side Effects calls Vellum hair, is the same workflow. And let's just keep moving and set this up before I start adding in the other stuff up there. So we'll just keep going with the Vellum solver. Top level is a bit more simplified or just quick to set up. Bring up the timeline, and we play it, everything falls down. So we could turn off gravity for right now, or actually I guess leave gravity on and just add a ground plane. You can see it like stands up. Some of them eventually fall down. We go inside of it and add the pop force with just a curl noise or turbulence. We have a pasta maker, spaghetti, procedural spaghetti setup. But I'm just trying to basically illustrate with this is that these aren't attached to anything. We just have a bunch of little worms that you pulled out of your coffee machine or something. They're all like amped up with caffeine. They're hopping around. I'm not necessarily making grass. I'm just starting with like a somewhat simple. You could use this definitely for grass or weeds or anything like that. I'm just making a kind of like abstract kind of for setup or whatever. This is just going to be like a strip of fabric, like it could be a shag carpeting or something like that. I don't know. Kind of roughly what I have in mind, I guess. But yeah, basically I was going in and adding the noise to show these aren't attached to anything right now. They're just a bunch of lines that exist independently, just a bunch of fettuccine pasta or something like that. Spaghetti noodles. So if you look on the Vellum hair, it does have this pin to animation section. You're getting hungry, all this talk of pasta. So yeah, we could add the pin like we were doing with the vehicle to pull it off by adding more constraints. Or they also have it set up like all in one. You can add your constraints in here as well. I'm just gonna go back, going over here. So somewhere, sometimes all right, here it is. These are other notes that I make just for myself, but other people find them useful as well too. This is like Vex code that you can use to make root tips or the endpoints of curves. So if I want to get the roots right here, I think I can just use this vertex prim index. We'll just set that up. we'll do, if you want to make a group, you just do an integer attribute here using I before the @ symbol, and then group, and then underscore. And then whatever you type in after that will be the name of the group. So if I just do like test equals 1, middle mouse button here, and you can see all of the points are included in that test group. I'm just gonna call this root. And then if I do the vertex prim index, let me look back at that. 0 to say myself, and then VTX num. So that's the vertex number. And then you're just checking to see if that equals 0. So the vertex number, you use it instead of PT num because it resets -1. I don't. You were seeing that over here. That's just saying num VTX -1. So because it's like the classic issue of counting from 0 or counting from 1. So the reason people do num VTX -1, if you have a line, you have vertex numbers 0, 1, 2, 3. Num VTX would return 4 because you would have 4 vertices making up the line. So you do -1 to see if it's equal to 3 in my hypothetical, to basically say, is this the last vertex or is this the last point? Does that make sense? We could do a stripped down example. But basically, like, -1 is a different thing. Yeah, it's usually referring to a spare input. So if I add the spare input here and do, I don't know what I would be linking it to, but whatever spare inputs you add, these, you refer to them starting at -1. So this one would be -1, -2, -3. But yeah, this -1 that I was doing here is for a different reason. So yeah, and then if you want to see these highlighted in the viewport, on the bindings tab, output selection group, if you just specify which one you want it to highlight after this code runs, you can set that over here. So just to visualize, we're basically just saying when the vertex number is equal to 0. And if you look over here at these VTX vertices, so because you do vertex number after the colon here, you can see it keeps resetting for each line. But point num or PT num for each line keeps incrementing, or it keeps going up. So that's the reason to set things up this way. Yeah, so I think we're good. Then over here for pinpoints, we have the root ready. We'll just do, I guess we'll leave it like this for right now. Can turn off the ground. Some start to fall over, but they are most certainly attached now, which is cool. We have our pinpoints working. So just go ahead, I guess, and I think we can start to introduce the twist. So I think we can just do guide deform. So if we take the hair Vellum hair curves that we generated. This is looking for rest skin and then animated skin. So the rest skin is just going to be the grid, and then the animated can be our twist. And then you can see it's deforming or distorting all of those curves with the same twist operation. Maybe, I think we're good. So we're going to animate this. I can just multiply the twist amount with the sine wave. Just do the frame number. So now this is just swaying back and forth like a bird flapping its wings or something like that. And then because we're doing animation, we just want to make sure to match animation. And the orientation actually does matter now, because we want it to, the orient, like if you look here, you see we have an orient attribute. So that will actually matter as well. So we have something happening. It's working, it's updating. But we probably want to introduce a bit more stiffness with bend and stuff like that, if we want this to look a little bit more realistic. I might increase our sine just to get stuff spinning around a bit quicker. So we have this cooked pasta. You want it less cooked or more stiff or whatever. Just with this bend, you could go maybe just up to 1. You can see the bend. This is a bit, I guess maybe we're al dente. Where this is more even like uncooked pasta, is super stiff. But yeah, something more maybe al dente. So this, again, this could be like shag carpeting or grass or something like that. Is pretty cool. And visualize over here is somewhat nice. You can, where is it? Maybe it's, thought you could visualize the orientation. I think it's with this pin to target. So you could see these little axes are drawing like the orientation of the surface. So that orient attribute is somewhat nice, and again, it would keep getting updated. So even when you copy the points, target points, file, file. I'm just gonna switch this over to the axis. Can copy it. Right now it's using the P scale, like the thickness of the curves. I might just delete it. So the Vellum solver uses P scale to do collisions, but if you want your geometry to the copy swap not to use that, you can just delete it like that. But I'm basically just showing that this, you can see the orientation or whatever is like following the curve, which is pretty nice. Like in the past, sometimes we've done this orient along curve to calculate it, but this solver will automatically like keep track of it and update it as your hair, your wires or whatever are deforming. You can even use it if we do another grid. Go back to another quad strip and do the path deform. So this node, I did a stream about it like a couple months ago, I think, but it was new in 18.0.499. So you just need to make sure your Houdini is this version or later to use it. But it's super useful with the, I think I have this switched around, with the Vellum stuff. It will automatically like deform a single grid, like it kind of is doing combination copy to points and sweep all in one. Let me get rid of this. I think the one thing we want to change, instead of fraction of geo length, we want to do fraction of curve length. And looks like these are facing the wrong way. So I want this size to be 10. I think I had it. I think it was okay. Just updating it like that should be good. I was just turning off the back face tint to get it. We could flip it around or whatever, either way is fine. But if you're doing individual curves and you want both sides to look okay, you can just turn off that tint back faces. I just press the D hotkey to bring up the display options over the viewport. If you want to, you could, might have done this. If you want to, you could like rotate this stuff. So just rotate this along the Z axis, I think, like 90 degrees. To change the directions. So we go either 0 or 90. Just depending on which way your stuff is facing. We're just super fast. Even this is like a ton of geometry. It's a super good way to if you're doing streamers or stuff that like traditionally you would do if you're doing a hair system, you have a ton of hair that you just want to generate at render time or render as tubes or stuff like that. But if you're doing somewhat more advanced stuff, turning this into like little cloths or streamers or carpeting that's like shag carpeting, like twisted curves, doing this path deform is pretty nice. So even doing maybe tube, we just want it to be along the Z, I think. Going along the Z axis. It's like the copy SOP and all that kind of stuff in Houdini treats the Z axis as like the default axis. So if we go to polygons, this might be a little too beefy. Let's give this a try. So then we have our tubes working. We'll probably go up a little bit more with our resolution of the geometry. More macaroni noodles. Everything's turning into noodles today. So that's pretty cool. The other thing we can do, let's take a look at our attributes that we have. We have the orient. We have almost too many attributes here. But yeah, we have the orient information that's telling the path deform how to rotate or orient our geometry. I'm just gonna middle mouse button to get a more consolidated view. So we have width, W, a ton of stuff. I'm looking for something that's going to give us like the length of the curve, like a UV attribute or something. I don't see it, so I'm just going to make it with the resample node. Basically, if you turn off, yeah, the curve U, did it exist? I didn't see it. Yeah, it doesn't exist right now, so I'm going to generate it with the resample. Yeah, so if you turn off all of those settings, you'll see it doesn't change the geometry at all. But you can still generate the curve U attribute with it. So if we create it, click on it, and then you can visualize it, and you see we have the curve U. This is the length from 0 to 1 along the curves. Someone's doing some Vellum. I don't think I've seen this. I don't know, my Firefox is messed up. Let me try it again. I didn't see this. This is like the Blender implementation. He I guess this is just something that he's made. But yeah, it'd be super cool for modeling if someone properly released that kind of tool. With like, I've seen a lot of people showing that with Blender. I think Cinema, you can do some similar stuff with it. But yeah, for modeling like drapes of furniture or comforters or pillows, like architectural visualization or lots of workflows, that kind of thing could be super, just speed up your process quite a bit. So I'm doing this, just say generate curve U. And the reason to do this is so that we could twist or change the orientation of these over the curves. So if we just look at the wrangle, not that one, just the attribute wrangle. We can use this to modify the orientation. So P at orient. The P is for the quaternion, so it's just a special data type for rotations that has 4 components. So you use the P to read or write to it to specify that you're using a quaternion. And if you generally don't work with these like directly in terms of like setting the numbers like that. Like normal is a vector or something, so it's a little bit easier to modify it directly. But this is using like complex math to represent the data. So if you want to adjust them, I'll usually adjust them using matrix. Just do rot for rotate, and usually just start with the identity, like a default orientation or transformation. And then if you rotate these, say rotate the matrix, say this gets somewhat complicated pretty quickly. But the reason I'm doing it this way is because then you can use a vector to specify your rotation like that. So then if you multiply the orientation by this, then you can see what I've basically done is just rotated everything. Whoops. Maybe I have it going the wrong way. I think I've done a few things wrong. All right. So I was rotating 180 degrees. That's why it wasn't showing up. Let me make sure my got too many numbers here. So yeah, I definitely don't want to do it that axis. I think that this the y-axis is the one we want to use. You can see now it's popping everything 90 degrees. This middle argument of the rotation is happening in radians, so it's like 2 pi is 360 degrees, or an entire circle. When I was doing pi, that's why I was making the mistake of like half circle or 180 degrees. So with these strips, we weren't noticing a rotation. If you want to work, you just do like a random number based off of the primitive number. These will just generate a random number between 0 and 1. But if you want the full rotations, you would have to scale this by 2 pi. So now you would get them randomly rotated. So sometimes that's useful for, I don't know, if you're doing like fur or grass or something like that, maybe you would want them to be randomly rotated. If we want to do the twist instead, just comment that out. What we're going to want to do is just multiply curve u by our twist amount. I forgot the u. Classic blunder. So now we're doing one full rotation over the duration of the curve. Why not attribute randomize? You might be able to do it with attribute randomize. I don't know how well it works with quaternions. Like the other reason you can feed in your curve u and rotate based off of it, I don't think you can like augment or modulate with this curve u. If you wanted to before your simulation, you might be able to adjust the orientation. But because I basically want, let me see if this works. So you could visualize it like this. I don't know if I can make it smaller. So attribute randomize might give me completely random rotations, but even before, when I was rotating, I guess I might have been rotating around the wrong axis. I think my up axis might actually be wrong a little bit. But so basically, like, the reason to do this is you want to make sure that these are just spinning directly around the curves and constrained to still be pointing along them. So with this attribute randomize, you don't have as much control. So that would be why people would go into Vex and do things this way. Yeah, and then you can as well be more easily specifying, like, start with 0 rotations, go up to 1. Let me just turn off my my visualizer. Maybe I have to do it at this node. Oh no, I have too many of them. I think I can just do it with that button over here on the viewport. So yeah, doing it like that, just more control in general, I would say, is the main reason to do it. Make another copy of this, and if we add a random number based off of the curve number or the primitive number, then you can offset the rotation somewhat uniquely for each curve. Whoops. Get back into the perspective. All right. And then this one as well, you would want to probably multiply it by 2 pi to get it fully randomized for each curve. And lastly, like if you add time or frame or something like that, then you can get, let me just maybe do this before things move. All right. Then you get some twisting like over time. So we'll do minus to go the other way. And then if you just multiply, you can get those things going faster. So for whatever reason, maybe you want your streamers spinning and rotating and flipping around or whatever. So you have kind of all that control with doing things this way. So I think if I tried it over here with orient for direction or orientation, it looks like this is setting it per point, so that's a bit of an issue. You might be able to do it maybe if you like enumerate index per primitive. You might have to promote it as well. So you have somewhat random rotations, but I think there's some skewing and stuff like that happening to some of these curves. But yeah, it's again just with controller stuff like that. Maybe you have a director's note. He wants like a rotation sweep, like a wind sweeping across these or something like that. You'd need to get into more math and do some stuff like that to have like very specific rotations and things like that happening. You could just leave it and have them flopping around. But yeah, I think this workflow is pretty nice. Let me try maybe go up higher resolution there just to get a little bit more twisting, like better resolution for twisting, and maybe make more curves, maybe longer. See what happens. Could be cool. Let's see what it looks with all the grids. It's like a dog. What is the one called that looks like a mop? You think I can find it? Dougal? Is that what it's called? Commodore? You think it's a I don't know. I'm hesitant to search for Dougal. But yeah, it could, maybe it's a thing like that. Oh, it's AL. I see a few results. Google the Dougal. This is like somewhat DreamWorks style almost. But yeah, this could be something like that. Maybe this is like the car wash. You're getting your stuff dried off. But yeah, it's pretty fast for this path to form. Nice, somewhat flexible workflow. We'll go even higher resolution maybe. In our pasta machine, giving it a workout today. So yeah, this is pretty cool. And then it looks like there is like some penetrations and stuff like that. If we go back up to the start, we just start to name. Some of this, it's usually a good idea to start to name these wrangles. Otherwise you'll get like attribute wrangle 38 and it's just a bit of a mess. All right. So when you initialize the hair constraints or the vellum hair, you could visualize the thickness, and like that was one of the reasons we were starting to get some of the things overlapping. So if you adjust this edge length scale, then you can see how thick the solver is treating the curves. We might also want some more segments. So as I stretch these hair curves out, maybe need to go up to 24. Because we made them so thick, let me take a look. Yeah, you just want to make sure the self collisions is turned on. I think you can. I don't know if this will work. So it looks like the width attribute isn't keeping track of the thickness. Let's go back. How do you deal with the massive difference in behavior in Vellum with high versus low res geometry? You can never get a really dense line to bend like a line with few points. Usually I'll just have to stick with kind of go back to the fewer points for that case. I think you would be generally controlling it just using this density and then the different like strengths and ratios and stuff like that. But I don't think that there's a good necessarily like ideal solution for that. So you can see even with this, like we lost some stiffness as we increased the amount of points. So I would try going like a bit higher to kind of compensate for that. But I don't, other than those kind of tricks, this is why you don't like Vellum. You think it was better with wires? I usually find with Vellum, like it's so fast that having to compensate a bit. Or maybe you had more success with other softwares doing hair or wires. But yeah, I think generally, like we're getting a bit better stiffness there. it's possible you might need more substeps sometimes as you're adding more geometry, like more constraints for it to stabilize. That might be another reason why it's like a bit more springy, is because it's just you don't have enough constraints or enough substeps to solve all the constraints. But yeah, it looks like we got our stiffness a bit better there. But yeah, I mean, I think all the solvers in Houdini, like, you always have to do a bit of finessing as you change resolutions and detail and stuff like that in your geometry. But the good thing is that they're getting faster, so it's less time you need to spend tweaking them or whatever. Do we want to get these tubes playing even nicer together? We might want to go a bit higher with the edge length scale. Let's see if it can sort that out. Might be a mess. Sometimes they're too... I don't know if they're sticking together too much. Like they're already starting too close together. Whoops. I don't think I meant to click that. Alright. You can also visualize the thickness. Could be an issue of them just starting too close together. Like sometimes with the bullet solver, you have things initialized already penetrating. The solver will treat them like they're permanently glued or stuck together. Let me just try going to a later frame. So it looks like this is a pretty slow simulation now with all the increase segments and substeps. Not terribly slow, it's just a little slower than I expected. But yeah, I might just make these thinner for right now. I'm not sure if it needs more substeps or more iterations to fully resolve those kind of constraints. Just the thickness. But yeah, maybe this gives you some more ideas. Some of the... Seems like a lot of the man versus machine stuff does these kind of soft body curves and things, right? I feel like doing some orientation and path deforming, you get pretty close to some of these ideas pretty quickly. It's like a bit of that reaction diffusion type look, a little bit. Umair, how's it going? So yeah, and you can even do the time blend again. So for this, I would turn on interpolate quaternions, and then if you do time shift, or you could even do it all in one, I think, just by speed. Just go to quarter speed. Maybe just do flipbook. See what we get. Some wiggly boys. Yeah, I feel like this, and then the is it universal everything? That did all the 3D characters. I feel like a lot of it is hair is out of control. Yeah, I feel like this a lot of this stuff can recreate with Vellum solvers as well. This like streamers stuff is pretty cool. Bunch of Harrys. The one I'm looking up is Universal Everything. Method did one. There was the it was like a event. It was like the advertising guild or something. They also, I guess it was a Major Laser, right? This one might be newer. Yeah, the Major Laser. I don't want my audio to get muted. I'm gonna have to get it. But yeah, I think so. The ones I was searching was Universal Everything. Basically, everyone started copying each other pretty quickly with this kind of stuff. I'm sure even before Method did this, some other people were doing this kind of idea. But yeah, basically every big advertising studio, like their clients probably came to them looking with this as their reference or what they had in mind. So everyone eventually started doing the same thing. So yeah, these ones here that I was looking up was Universal Everything. But in general, I think every big animation studio at some point did some blobby guys like that. But yeah, doing Vellum for that kind of result, you can get pretty cool physics, and it solves pretty quickly with a ton of geometry. I think this kind of thing used to be a lot harder to set up just a few years back, but with the Vellum and with the path deform, with all that stuff, you can get pretty interesting stuff pretty quickly. If you're going back to, let me turn on my randomization maybe. Just do this one. We're just trying to do a somewhat random rotation. Yeah, so another thing you can do, just gonna subdivide this. Oops. Subdivide. if you do like a mountain or noise before you path deform it, you can start to get like that kind of noise stretched along or embedded into the ribbons. So I'm trying to do a noise. Maybe we want to stretch it along the Z. Maybe we need to go the other way. Something like that. So then that will kind of act as like a texture, or it will kind of get like baked in to your ribbons. There's another way you could add like just a little bit of detail to everything. Could maybe try one more. Maybe a bit slow. But yeah, then you kind of have like a bit of cloth or somewhat interesting like deformations or whatever. Could do this poly soup. So the poly soup is somewhat nice because it will optimize, basically each strip will be its own poly soup primitive. So it's a bit easier for like the viewport to manage all that geometry. And then if you do randomize, just the color, if you do it per primitive, because each primitive is an individual poly soup, you automatically get like the, based off of this information, you can get random colors pretty quickly. It's another useful kind of trick with the poly soups. Get our streamers. Maybe I'll just go back down. Go back to our flipbook. So yeah, it's pretty nice with that orient attribute. Traditionally, just with like wire or point deform, you don't get as much as like nicely detailed deforming geometry with curves. But if when you have the orient attribute and then you work with the path deform, you get a much better like bending, motion and deformation of like 3D geometry. So before with point deform or stuff, you would get weird artifacts where things would like flatten down, or you would just get weird folding and artifacts like that. But you get really nice preservation of volume and everything like that with this method. So we have a really nice tie-dye brush. It's like a mop or something. Make all your Swiffer commercials with this. And tie-dye your floor while you mop it. Or it could be a mohawk with Bob Ross. This is Bob Ross's magical brush. He's usually going in with the felt tip things, right? It's like the chisel tip. Or he had a thick one as well, right? Something like that. What is that one that's like it's like a felt sponge type thing? These ones. They used to always give me these in like grade school for art class, and I hated them. You have like no precision no control with it. This is Universal Everything? Who did it? Wasn't it Universal Everything? But yeah, I think where was it? This kind of anemone stuff, wavy tubes. Yeah, you could do pretty interesting stuff with the Vellum solver for this type of thing as well. The undersea anemones. It's like seaweed or something. Pretty cool. The dancing mohawk. All right, so I'm probably gonna leave it here. A little shorter of a stream compared to, I guess before it was like 3 hours. But yeah, so just looking into a bit of the cloth rendering stuff, and then doing some wire or hair, mop, carpet, shag, rug, whatever you want to call it, doing a bit of that. So we'll just put this into a new folder. Maybe 26th. Oh my goodness, almost September. Toothbrush slow-mo. Back to making toothbrush advertisements. It's almost, yeah, September. They were putting the Halloween costumes out at the store already. What the hell is going on? Just call this Vellum brush twist. All right. Maybe it's canceled, but they're still trying to sell the costumes. I think my suspicion is that people's parents are still gonna buy costumes. People are still gonna dress their kids up for Instagram. It's well, I mean, I don't know. Like the neighborhoods aren't probably not gonna pass out candy. I don't know. I guess it depends where what neighborhood you're in, what region you're in. Certain ones might be more cleared than others. But I'm guessing it will be mostly scaled back. So yeah, I'm just gonna pop into the full screen, Control B. Sometimes I do that just to organize. So we'll just do this as like our axis, visualize, orient. This is the axis geo. This one we were deleting the P scale. We're doing slow-mo here. And this is just our curve streamer geometry. This one we're doing color. So if you just spend a little bit of time to do this at the end, you'll thank yourself later when you reopen your scene files. If you just need to refer back to whether it was your rotation, how you were doing that, just pulling bits out or quickly referencing it, it just makes it a lot easier to find things doing it this way. All right, we'll just save it again. So I'll put that on the Google Drive, and yeah, we'll be back Friday cool zone. Same time, same place. Hope everyone has a good rest of the week.